Bonjour. Je suis française, mais ça fait 10 ans que j'habite à New York, donc je vais faire ma talk en anglais, donc vous me pardonnez, hein, merci. Okay, I'm Alex Chin. I'm very happy to be here at DevFest Nantes. It's actually the first time I've ever given a talk in France, which is my home country, so I'm very thankful. I'm a programmer and a teacher, and I'm going to tell you the story of how shaving my head made me a better programmer, sort of, and what I learned along the way. So I'm originally from Paris, and I moved to the US to go to college, and that's where I learned to code. I originally wanted to be an astronaut, so I joined the engineering program at my school, and one of the requirements was an intro to programming class in Python. So I took it, and I fell in love with code immediately. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It felt like I could be creative and analytical all at the same time. I felt like I'd finally found an art form that I could communicate with. So I started programming, and I decided to major in computer science, which is what you study in the US when you want to write code. And that was an easy decision, but staying in computer science wasn't easy. And it wasn't because learning to code is hard, which it is. It's frustrating. It's a lot of dealing with your computer telling you failed over and over again. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was overcoming other people's perceptions and my own perceptions about my abilities as a programmer. At the time, I was one of maybe 5 women in my computer science classes, and there were some classes where I was the only woman. And there were very few people in my classes who hadn't been programming since they were 10 years old. And so even though I did well in my classes and got good grades, no one really wanted to work with me or talk to me. It was very lonely. It felt like I was hypervisible and invisible at the same time. And this was before all the scandals came out, before people started talking about tech's lack of diversity, before there was really a shared language around it. And so it was my first year in college, and computer science didn't seem like the place for me. People didn't really believe I was a programmer. They would say to me, "Prove it. Do you know what the command line is?" Which is a ridiculous question. But it wasn't just the other students. One of my male friends told me that our computer science professor said this to him. "So when are you going to fuck Alex?" So students didn't see me as a programmer, and my professors didn't either. But it wasn't just them. I didn't believe it myself. Until my last year of college, when people would ask me if I was a programmer, I would say, "Not really, I'm trying to become one." Which is silly because the act of programming is what makes you a programmer. But I'm really stubborn, so I decided I was going to be a good programmer in a way that would be unquestionable to the world. So I joined my school's competitive programming team and became a leader of our computer club and took all the hardest computer science classes and won a bunch of hackathons, and I finally became accepted by my peers. And it's ridiculous that for others, all they had to do was show up and look nerdy, and I had to do all of this work, but I made it, so it didn't seem to matter. So then I graduated from college with a computer science degree in 2013 and started my career as a software engineer in New York. And this photo was taken on graduation day at the McDonald's in front of Yankee Stadium. And though I had experienced some discrimination in school for being a woman in the computer science department, I was not prepared for what was about to happen in the tech world. Some of it was small things like microaggressions, like people asking me over and over if I was sure I was a programmer. And there was also some bigger, scarier, more serious incidents, like what we've seen happen at Uber. And I'm going to tell you about some of these. And I've given a version of this talk before where I don't mention these stories because I speak to a lot of young women and I don't want to discourage them from entering the tech field. And I found a draft of a blog post that I wrote after these things happened when I was 22, and I never published it. And I'm going to read the first few sentences of that blog post now. "I didn't want to have to write this. I didn't want my first blog post to be about this. I wanted it to be about something technical, like browser compatibility or accessibility or anything else. But I can no longer keep silent. And it's not because I can't bear to hold this in, but rather because you all need to hear this. I used to be one of those women who believed that all that mattered was my code. I didn't want to identify as female developer. I just wanted to be a developer." And it goes on. And I never published this because I was too afraid at the time. But I'm going to share these stories today, and there will be some public shaming involved. So here we go, 5 stories that made me want to quit programming. At my first software engineering internship, I was the only woman on the engineering team. A few weeks into the job, the QA lead, that's quality assurance, asked me to get coffee. I was new, and he was nice, so I said yes. As we were getting coffee, he started asking me personal questions, like, where do you live? What train do you take to work? Do you have a boyfriend? Does he get jealous? Do you like to dress sexy for him? Do you wear lingerie for him? And so on and so forth. It made me really uncomfortable, and I didn't really know what to do or say, so I just drank my coffee as quickly as possible and headed back to the office. After that, he kept trying to spend time with me, and I was really nervous around him and hated having to work close to him every day. But I was too scared to tell anyone because he was the lead of the QA team, and I was just an intern. On my last day, though, I got the courage to tell my boss, the CTO, what happened. He was really surprised, and he said, "But he's such a nice guy." And he assured me that he would make sure it didn't happen again. I later found out that he continued to harass and stalk women at the company and even got promoted. But, you know, he was a really nice guy and a very high performer. I've blurred his information to respect his privacy. Just kidding. Thank you. So after that experience, I mostly wore jeans and t-shirts to work, and I stopped wearing makeup or perfume so as not to entice, I guess, the other people around me. After that, I got another job as a front-end engineer. That team was really great. Even though I was the only woman on the engineering team, I felt safe and supported. I was doing a great job. We were part of a portfolio of companies, and so I got to attend a lot of tech events and conferences. And the job was great, but the stuff that happened at tech events was not great. Soon after I joined, our team was invited to a networking event organized by our investors. It was a really nice evening with an open bar, and after a few drinks, I started talking to another software engineer, and at one point during the conversation, he tried to kiss me, and I had to physically push him away. After that happened, I was pretty upset, but I decided I'm going to make the most out of the event. I'm going to talk to some other people. So I started talking to someone else, a designer, and after a while, he also tried to kiss me. And I also had to push him away, and at this point I was furious, so I yelled at him that this wasn't okay, you can't do this. And he told me I shouldn't be so stuck up. So I decided to leave the event, and after that I really avoided tech events with alcohol and never had more than one drink at a tech event. A couple months later, our engineering team went to San Francisco for a programming conference. One of our investors was based there, and he invited me to meet with him to talk about my work and my career. He said I had a lot of promise, and I thought it was a great opportunity. You know, he was a successful investor. So we met for dinner, and I quickly realized this was not about work. This was a date. And I tried to steer the conversation towards work, asking him questions about the company, about investing, taking notes on my phone, trying to send every possible signal that this wasn't a romantic situation without offending him, but he wasn't getting it. So after dinner, he asked me to come home with him for champagne. Yeah, this guy sucks. And he really insisted, and it was really hard to say no because he was one of our main investors, but I refused and got out of there. So after that, I really tried to avoid him, and I was a lot less friendly with the men that I met through work. A couple months after that, I went to a programming conference in Mexico. It was a really fun conference where everyone lived in little cabins by the beach. You shared a cabin with a few other people. And there was a lot of drinking at this conference. One night, one of the conference speakers who was staying in my cabin let himself into my room very drunk, and I was asleep. And he woke me up and tried to convince me to let him sleep in my bed with him, saying he didn't want to sleep alone. I was really scared, but I eventually got him out of my room. The next day, I told the conference organizers what happened, and so they sent out a reminder about the code of conduct. I spent the rest of the conference pretty much locked in my room, not wanting to run into him. And after that, my engineering team always sent a male chaperone with me to tech conferences. A few months later, our company was growing, so we hired a new VP of engineering. He had never worked with a woman on his team before, and he was my new boss. And he would say things that I couldn't even believe someone would be okay with saying. He would make jokes about how women existed only to serve men. He would make comments about my appearance, telling me he didn't like the way I dressed or how I did my hair. One time I was wearing all black, and he told me I looked like a mustard sandwich. And I think it's because I'm Asian and my skin is yellow, but I'm not sure. When he was disciplined by our CEO for his behavior towards me because everyone knew about it, he apologized and he said that women in tech like the attention. No. He also said he wished we had more women on the team, but that meant he would have to lower the hiring bar, which is very insulting and also very untrue. And although I was one of the first engineers to join the team and my code was all over the code base, he started pushing me onto smaller and smaller projects, giving me grunt work. And at one point, I was asked to stop talking during product meetings because I intimidated the product lead, who was also a man. It became impossible for me to work there, and so I ended up having to quit because it was just too hostile a work environment. But it doesn't really feel like it's a choice. It felt like being pushed out. By the way, I just gave this talk with these stories for the first time at DockerCon in San Francisco a few months ago, and I was really scared to call these men out, but the response has been really supportive, and within 3 hours, 2 women messaged me to tell me that some of these men had harassed them too. But anyway, back to the story. So after all these incidents of harassment, nowhere felt safe. Not my job, not the tech world, not even code. People were even leaving sexist comments on my pull requests on open source projects. And all of this happened by age 22. I was 1 year into my career, and it was not fine. I became very depressed. I even tried to write a blog post about it, and I never published it. I felt like, why do I love programming if programming doesn't love me back? I was just trying to do my job, do what I loved, just trying to code. And it was becoming impossible for me to do it. It was actually making me depressed. And it felt like it should be the end of my career. And I seriously considered quitting programming. But as I said before, I'm very stubborn, so I decided I'm going to find a solution. So I sought out my friends for advice, and I realized I only had male programmer friends. So I decided to meet as many female engineers as possible. I got friends to introduce me to female engineers at their companies and went on blind coffee dates with a bunch of ladies. And I was looking for advice and to create a support network. I would ask them, what do I do? How do I survive in this field? I got a lot of different advice. One woman who'd been a professional programmer for over 10 years told me when she cut her hair short, she stopped getting sexually harassed at tech events. I was like, okay. This one male friend who was really trying to help told me, why don't you become a badass programmer? Like, become famous, become known for your expertise, and people will have to take you seriously. Basically telling me to lean in. And I figured, okay, I can try that. So I started giving talks at meetups about things I was very passionate about, like the JavaScript programming language and web accessibility. And it went really well. And after a while, I even got invited to speak at a big programming conference, kind of like DevFest Nantes, where people were flying from around the country to attend, and they paid hundreds of dollars for a ticket, and I got to share the stage with people I really respected, people who built the tools I used every day. And I was certainly the youngest person on stage. I was 23, and I was talking about something important, about accessibility. So I was really excited. I felt very accomplished. I was badass. So I gave my talk, and it went very well, but then the first thing I got asked afterwards was, this guy asked me, how do I talk to women at bars? And I couldn't believe it. That had nothing to do with my talk. After all the work I did to get there, even in the moment when my expertise was undeniable, like I was literally on stage at a conference that he paid money to attend teaching him things, even then, I wasn't seen as a programmer. So I learned that being a badass doesn't help. After all that work, after leaning all the way in, I wasn't seen as a developer, not even female developer, just female. So at that point, I was really angry. I was really sick of being treated this way because of my gender and my appearance. But I'm a hacker, so I decided to hack my appearance. So I shaved my head for the first time. And it was way before Stranger Things, so it was not as cool then. Like now, there's a lot of people with their shaved heads. But anyway, so I shaved my head, and the weirdest thing happened. Suddenly, overnight, I was a good programmer. I stopped getting sexually harassed at conferences. People listened to me and respected me. I stopped being this mix of hypersexualized and underskilled programmer. And I tried to think about it scientifically. Like, is there something in hair that makes you worse at being a programmer? Like, maybe my hair was weighing me down, like weighing my programming skills down. But I don't think so, because this guy's a really good programmer. And this guy, too. By the way, this is Max Ogden. He's a big Node contributor, and he was recently accused of sexual abuse by his partner and admitted to it. Anyway, this guy is also a great programmer. Just kidding, that's Serial from the movie Hackers, which is a great film. You should all watch it. So it had nothing to do with my hair, obviously, but now all of a sudden I was seen as a good programmer. So what had changed then? If not my actual skills, which hadn't leveled up overnight. It was the way I was being perceived by my peers. I was no longer this hyper-feminine lady who didn't belong. People even mistook me and my boyfriend for a gay couple once. And so I didn't present as feminine anymore, so it was acceptable for me to be a programmer and even a good one. And this was a mind-blowing discovery for me because even though I knew that I was a good programmer and I knew about sexism, now I really understood it and had proof of this on a personal level. And so I realized that the tech industry is not a meritocracy, unlike I initially thought, unlike many people had told me. The industry doesn't allow capable, passionate people like me to succeed regardless of their skills. It systematically pushes out women, gender nonconforming people, people of color, people with disabilities, etc. And I thought about the advice people had given me, which was all about changing myself. Cut your hair, become a badass, be more of a bitch, learn to ignore it, all real advice. And I thought, no. It's not me who has to change. It's the tech industry that has to change. Technology is a part of everything we do. It shapes how we interact with the world and with each other. It controls money, how we learn, who you date, who becomes president. And humans build technology. So the people who are building the technology we use every day really have a huge influence on how we live our lives and on our future. So who these humans are and how they write code really matters. By the way, this is a Google image search for the word technology. Apparently, the color of technology is blue. But right now, for the most part, the gatekeepers of technology are a small and homogeneous group that is not representative of all the people who use technology. And this is a problem because a homogeneous tech workforce leads to massive blind spots. For example, how the iPhone X couldn't tell Chinese women apart. Now it works. Or when Google Photos launched with image recognition that labeled pictures of black people as gorillas, that was bad. So if we want to solve the world's problems, we need people from all backgrounds building technology because we need diverse perspectives to solve complex issues, and because those who experience problems are the best equipped to solve them. Right now, the tech industry is broken because it's homogeneous and it's run by a bunch of assholes who are not held accountable for their actions or decisions. So I was 23, back to the story, and I realized that the tech industry is broken, so I decided, as long as I'm in this field, I'm going to work to fix it, to make it more diverse, more inclusive, and better for all humans. So I started my quest to teach underrepresented and vulnerable populations to code so that we can change the face of technology, create pathways for economic mobility for communities that have been left out of technology, and to empower them to build solutions to the problems that affect them instead of their fate being in the hands of others. I started out teaching on the side as a volunteer at a high school for recent immigrants in the Bronx and Harlem. Some of my Cristo Rey High students built an app that teaches young adults about affordable makeup and makeup styles for all skin tones with the goal of challenging white supremacist beauty standards. They went on to win multiple hackathons and even demoed at the EmojiCon conference. And one of my students, Candy, started college at Stanford last year and is studying computer science there. Then I joined Coalition for Queens, now rebranded Pursuit, which is a free programming school for adults from low-income and underrepresented backgrounds, as their curriculum director, where I helped launch the program. Our class was 50% women, 50% immigrants, 50% people who had no college degree, and 50% Black and Latinx. And the average income of the class, when it started, was about $20,000 a year. And graduates went on to work at the New York Times, Spotify, BuzzFeed as professional software engineers, and some make upwards of $120,000 now. One of the projects that came from this class was an Android app called Blazon, which is an online community of women, children, people of color, and LGBTQ folks that aims to combat street harassment. Madeline, one of the students from this class, joined Pinterest and started Tecnolochicas, which is a group for Latinas in tech, and has become an icon and advocate for diversity in tech in San Francisco. After launching the pilot class of Coalition for Queens, I decided I wanted to broaden my impact on education, so I went back to coding full-time and joined Skillshare, where I worked for 2 years and ended up leading their web engineering team. As a teacher, I hoped that there was a way to create diverse and inclusive workplaces in tech, and at Skillshare, I was able to put it in practice. Before Skillshare, I'd always been the only woman on engineering teams, and when I joined, we were only 2. And after working there for 2 years, we built an engineering team that was 40% women and 60% people of color, which is amazing. There, we also started CodeShare, which is a quarterly conference about the intersection of code, art, and creativity, where we specifically highlighted the work of people from underrepresented backgrounds. After that, I started mentoring young girls in the worldwide Technovation competition. For that competition, 2 of my high school students built an app that aims to reduce produce waste, which is a huge problem in America, by connecting farms to restaurants so that farms can sell their ugly produce, which would otherwise go wasted, at a discounted rate. It's an iOS app called Grow Green. And Rachel on the left is now studying computer science at Yale, and Priya on the right just graduated high school and is continuing to build Grow Green. She was just named Crane's 20 Under 20 a couple months ago. And she also just spoke at the Global Food Innovation Summit in Milan, and she's 18 years old, so that's pretty cool. After that, I joined Gakko, which is a global education design studio based in Tokyo and New York, where up until this summer, I worked as the director of technology. There, I was teaching high schoolers, and this is really where I honed in on my teaching pedagogy. Inspired by my previous teaching experiences, I designed a curriculum in which all of our students learned to code by building an app that solved a problem they identified in their communities. We taught our students to code as an ethical endeavor. We taught them the importance of building with empathy in mind, building with humanity in mind, and of the weight of their choices as software engineers. And I found that when my students were working towards not only bettering their skills and themselves, but bettering the world and their communities, they learned much more and they learned much better. They pushed themselves beyond the limit of what they thought was possible. When they were bored, they found something thrilling, and they rose above all challenges because there was so much more at stake. And because of their unique perspectives, they were able to build something really innovative. One of my students, Marco, tackled the problem of lack of art in his neighborhood. He lives in a very low-income, kind of dangerous neighborhood in Brooklyn. And he believed that bringing more street art to the neighborhood would create a stronger sense of community and make it healthier, safer, and happier. And there's a lot of research to back that up. So his solution was a web app that connects artists to wall owners so that they can cover bare gray walls with street art. It's called Street Talk. It's really cool. And he's entering his junior year of high school now and continuing to work on it. And he really believes in it, and so do I, and he wants to get in the hands of street artists and cover his neighborhood with art, which is really inspiring. And I really believe in teaching my students to become radical technologists, to build technology for humankind. This is a photo of some of our students wearing our class shirts, and on it is the binary representation of the words, "With great power comes great responsibility." So after all this teaching, I learned 3 very important lessons about code. You shouldn't have to compromise on any aspect of your identity to do what you love. Some people have taken the wrong message from my story, which is that you should shave your head to be a coder, that's not it. Since shaving my head, I've had lots of different hairstyles. I wear it short now because I feel like it. And you should be able to just be you, whoever that is, and write code safely. 2, greatness in programming can come from anyone. Anyone can achieve excellence in code if they are given support, a safe space to learn, and if you trust that they can succeed. Seriously, I've taught people from age 12 to 63 from all socioeconomic backgrounds, races, countries, immigration status, genders, and this is the truth. And these projects that my students have built, they're important, they're game changers. So we need technologists from diverse backgrounds if we have any hope for a brighter future. It's because of these beliefs that I started my latest project. With the rise in visibility of issues surrounding police brutality and mass incarceration in the United States, I wanted to find a way to learn more about the criminal justice system. Because mass incarceration in the US, it truly is the latest iteration of slavery. So I wanted to learn more from people who had experience with the justice system. So I started teaching people who had been to prison how to code with the Fortune Society in October of 2016. They had a computer lab, so we held class there. And it was just 6 students, and they were all super passionate about learning to code, but it was really hard for them to make consistent progress because they didn't have a computer at home. It turns out you need a computer and the internet to learn to code. And so I realized that tech companies have a lot of used laptops just lying around in their IT closets, and I could probably get them to donate laptops to my class. And that's how the Code Cooperative was born. I needed a brand and a website so tech companies would donate laptops to us, and it worked. I got laptops for all my students and like 20 extra laptops that I donated to the Fortune Society's computer lab. And once the website and the story was out there, people really resonated with the mission. There were more people who wanted to be able to learn these skills. Other organizations wanted to send students, and there was an overwhelming cry of support from the tech community. So many people wanted to get involved and help out. And that's why today, almost 2 years later, because enough people believed in this mission, we have grown to become a collective. We're the Code Cooperative. We are an entirely volunteer-led community, and we run completely on donations. And we see a problem that we want to address. The tech industry is a closed, homogenous group that is building things that serve some people and not others, and that even harm a lot of people. We want to democratize access to tech education and teach our most vulnerable populations highly valuable skills that will allow us to have access to more opportunities, to create opportunities for ourselves, and to build technology that solves real problems that we have experienced. We teach people digital literacy and coding as a means of liberation. And we use the word liberation because we believe in the transformative power of tech education. People who have been in prison for over 15 years and don't know how to use the internet or a computer have a really hard time re-entering society and getting work. Being able to successfully navigate the digital world and create technology can be a life-changing opportunity and really make the difference between returning to prison and staying out. And we do this not just for the liberation of people who have been to prison, but for our own liberation and sense of justice, which is an expression that I'm borrowing from Robin DiAngelo. And these two quotes really encapsulate why I do this work. No one is free until we are all free, by the great Martin Luther King Jr. And then the following quote is about women, but it applies to all people. I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own, by Audre Lorde. We just wrapped up our latest Code Cooperative class, which took place over the summer. We had 10 students and 10 mentors. We adopted a one-on-one tutoring model so that everyone would be able to set their own goals and learn at their own pace. Our students all started out with different experiences and interests with technology, but they shared this strong curiosity and desire to learn more. Jody, in the middle, didn't know how to use a computer at all, and she wanted to be able to get work as a nurse in hospitals, for which you need to know how to use a computer. That's why she joined. Andrew, top left, was incarcerated for over 20 years, and at the age of 63, he was my oldest student, he learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and built a multimedia art project that teaches people about the legacy of slavery in the US criminal justice system. Our mentors are all professional software engineers like you who were generous enough to volunteer their time and their skills, and they worked one-on-one with our students to help them meet their learning goals. And all these awesome people gave up their Saturdays for the entire summer to come together and learn to use and create technology. Our first day of class was on June 30th, and we learned together for 12 weeks. We met up every Saturday for 6 hours. So that's 72 hours times 20 humans. That's 1,440 hours that we collectively spent doing this. We provided all our students with nearly brand new MacBooks that were donated by tech companies like Mike, Giphy, Kickstarter, Thrive Capital. And we were able to donate all the laptops to the students at the end of the program. We were also able to provide mobile hotspots for those who didn't have easy access to Wi-Fi at home. And with them, our students learned essential digital literacy skills like how to use a computer, how to use the internet, how to find information, how to send professional emails, build a resume, why secure passwords matter, and most importantly, how to teach yourself things that you don't know how to do already. And on top of that, our students learned the fundamentals of code and web development using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, GitHub, VS Code, and other industry standard tools. They built websites that address a problem they identified in their communities, and I'll tell you more about these later. We held class in a beautiful tech office space, and we had food and coffee at every class, which is important because it's hard to code when you're hungry. And we developed an open source curriculum that other people can keep contributing to and use to learn to code for free. And now I'm going to play a video that's like just our students talking about the first day of class. Music, sound?
I think what's unique about this program and this learning environment is that we welcome people from all different capabilities.
My goals are to first and foremost learn how to use a computer without looking at the keyboard.
It's not that I'm scared, it's just that I get overwhelmed and frustrated easily.
Like, I'm a geek by nature, I'm a nerd, I love computers. I want to further my skills in coding because I know really nothing about coding.
I came to the Code Cooperative eager to learn, essentially wanting to better myself and to help others who have gone through what I've gone through.
I have the strong belief that people who experience problems are the best equipped to solve them. If you're building something that solves a problem that affects you, a problem that you really care about, then you learn so much more and you learn so much faster.
I want to help people equip themselves to find their own way once they're released from prison. Well, I'm going to call it a concierge service, right? For people like myself returning to society. I came to that idea, based on my own experience. So I want to put this together so somebody else will not have to maybe suffer as much as I did.
I really want to get into computer coding because I want to be able to pass it on to my cousin's kids.
My base goals for the summer is to design a website that challenges the general public on their knowledge about our legal system.
These children are separated from their parents at the border. It's really been troubling. So it's something that I've thought about, like, what if I could create a website or an app to help this issue?
This is really the culmination of so much hard work, and to see that enough people out there believe in this idea and in this mission, that I'm so thankful for.
You know, I promised in my interview that I would be the code cooperative valedictorian, and I mean to be that.
By the way, valedictorian means like first in the class, like premier de la classe. Okay, so that was our students on the first day of class, and we just had our last class about a month ago. And it was also our first community showcase, and it was beautiful. We invited family and friends to come celebrate everything we learned. We got to celebrate each other and ourselves. All students reported having much higher confidence with using technology. But what's most important is that we truly became a community. On that day, I watched people who were strangers to each other 12 weeks earlier cheer for each other, hold each other, cry with each other, and call each other family. Ainsworth didn't know how to use a computer at the beginning of the class. Here he is showing off the code and website he built to some family friends. And this is Mike. He's always been super passionate about computers. When I met him, he said that when he was a kid, he wanted to be the first black astronaut. And I'll tell you about some of the projects. So Mike, he has experienced homelessness throughout his life. And one of the challenges he encountered when he was homeless was having a really difficult time finding free and reliable resources. He said all the websites dedicated to that had way too much information, it was always outdated and not easy to use on a phone, which is how most people who are experiencing homelessness browse the web. So he built a website, which is live now, that has a concise and up-to-date list of essential resources for people experiencing homelessness in New York, including showers, laundry, housing, meals, and he's still working on it. Mark, our self-described class valedictorian, left prison with a mission. He said he had such a hard time navigating his reentry that he wanted to build a service that would help guide other people leaving prison so they wouldn't have to suffer as much as he did. And he built the reentry navigation service, which contains a checklist of things one should go through when leaving prison. And this was inspired by a friend of his who passed away after his release because he didn't take the proper precautions after leaving prison. And this is a really amazing resource, and I think it will really help people. And Mark probably did become the class valedictorian. All of our students want to keep learning, and many of our community want to go teach their friends and families the skills they learned. So we're not just impacting individuals, but their friends and families too, and the people who will use the technologies our community builds. And more than ever, I know that this is important work. I've seen it change people's lives, and I'm committed to continuing this work for the liberation of all people, including myself. So hopefully I've made a convincing case throughout all these stories for why diversity in tech is important and even crucial to building better technology. And for the last part of this talk, I'll share with you some thoughts about how you can help make a change in this industry and in your own community. Because this is one of the questions I get asked the most. How do I make my organization more diverse? People ask me this all the time. This is a message I got from my ex a little while ago. I get a lot of these. So how can you start to make your organization more diverse? Here are a few pieces of advice from someone who has worked to change every organization I've ever been a part of. One of the most important rules of building product is you need to understand a problem in order to fix it. Why is there a lack of diversity in tech? How did we get here? Women actually invented computer science and were the first programmers. In the 80s, there was a big drop in women programming. That's when personal computers started showing up. Early personal computers were basically toys, like you could play Pong on them. And so companies decided to market these toys almost entirely to men and boys. And this idea that computers are for boys became the prevailing narrative. It became the story we told ourselves about computers. It defines who geeks were, all because of like a marketing decision. And so the image of the boy genius programmer, yeah, this is what a programmer looks like, emerged, and this led to a culture of systemic discrimination in software. And what this means is that because of this narrative of boy programmer genius that we all learned from the media and internalized for decades, there are invisible hurdles every step of the way that make it harder for certain groups of people to enter and succeed in technology. In the United States, people who aren't cisgender white and Asian men are heavily discouraged from studying computer science and even prevented from succeeding once they've chosen that career path. My story is an example of that. Even though I was passionate and excelled at programming, I was discouraged by classmates, professors, employers, colleagues, and almost convinced to quit multiple times. Systemic discrimination means there are hurdles at every step of the way. So tech's lack of diversity can't be explained simply as a pipeline problem. Many people talk about the pipeline problem. It's the idea that the lack of diversity in tech is due to the lack of qualified candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. For example, saying that not many women are interested in computer science to begin with, so it's natural that not many women have programming jobs. But this is false and has been debunked over and over and over and over again. Women have always been interested in computer science. Women even invented computer science, but we have been pushed out. And now, almost 50% of women in software leave the field at some point in their career. Similarly, in the US, 18% of computer science graduates are Black and Latinx, and yet only 5% of the programming workforce is. So there's no lack of qualified candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. That's not the problem. So the pipeline problem is a dangerous myth that is just used to end thoughtful discussions and prevent real change. Certain groups of people aren't worse at programming or less interested in it. There's not like a programming gene. As I said before, anyone can become excellent at programming, and everyone wants to learn to code, build cool things, and make a lot of money. Like, everyone wants to do it, for real. And so on a more micro level, why isn't your team diverse, even if you care about this? In a lot of cases, it doesn't happen on purpose. We hire our friends, we hire people we went to school with, our friends' friends, people who fit our culture, people who think and sound like us. And so lack of diversity in a lot of cases happens not on purpose, but on accident. Diverse and inclusive environments happen on purpose, intentionally. And an important part of being intentional about this is to measure your progress. We're scientists, we love data, we pride ourselves on having a data-driven culture, so let's be data-driven with diversity. The first step to making a change within your company is measuring where you are. How will you know if you're successful if you can't measure how far you've come? And this means actually gather diversity data on your team. And once you have that data, you can set meaningful goals. By how much do you want what numbers to grow? And when you've set these goals, you need to commit. All right. That wasn't that funny. But seriously, commit, and this can be the hardest part. Once you have your goals, don't compromise on them. If you want to hire or promote more underrepresented folks, then actually do it. I just did a big hiring push for my team, and it's really easy to not hire white men. Just don't do it. Literally, only look at LinkedIn profiles of people who belong to groups you want to hire from. And this is not reverse discrimination. That's not a real thing. This is simply working against systemic discrimination to provide the same opportunities to people from underrepresented backgrounds. So that's my advice for you if you want to make your community more diverse. Make sure that you understand the problem, measure your progress, and commit to making a change. And I'll point you to a couple more resources that have really helped me. ProjectInclude.org is a very thorough guide on how to build diverse and inclusive teams. You should read all of this. It's an amazing resource that a lot of people who know more than me have put a lot of work into. And follow all these people on Twitter: Amélie Lamont, Amy Nguyen, Ash Dryden, Omayeli Aranyeka, Candace Williams, Caroline Cinders, Kat Small, Erica Joy, Tashay Green, Marco Rogers, Terry Burns, and Tiffany Ashley Bell. And there are so many other awesome people that you can learn from, but this is a good start. And I'll close this talk with a quote by Beverly Daniel Tatum. This quote is specifically about racism, but it applies to all forms of discrimination. I sometimes visualize the ongoing cycle of racism as a moving walkway at the airport. Active racist behavior is equivalent to walking fast on the conveyor belt. Passive racist behavior is equivalent to standing still on the walkway. No overt effort is being made, but the conveyor belt moves the bystanders along to the same destination as those who are actively walking. But unless they are walking actively in the opposite direction at a speed faster than the conveyor belt, unless they are actively anti-racist, they will find themselves carried along with the others. Our job now is to walk actively in the opposite direction at a very high speed. Merci.